Hey, welcome to this first Q&A episode. Oftentimes I get really good questions in the comment section, maybe about a specific part of a song or a question about theory or technique or anything in between. And I don't always feel like I can adequately answer those questions just through replying back in the comment section. So I figured I would gather a few really interesting questions, put them in one spot, and answer them as succinctly as I can. It just so happens that a few of these questions that I'm going to draw from today related to timing and counting. So we're going to have a couple with that theme. And then the last one I'll address is more about what mode to use in a certain circumstance. So first question was about NICU. And the comment says, "Love this, but stumped on how to count it." So this one is a really good one to practice counting and thinking about time signatures and all that kind of stuff. So first things first, the main riff, and I'm assuming that this question is about just the main riff. If there's something more specific you were hoping I would hit on here, if you were the one that left this question, just leave another comment and I'll try to address it again. I'm going to keep doing these episodes. It just goes E flat 7 to D flat 7 and then back up. And it just kind of keeps doing that. Although sometimes Trey plays it differently depending on the version of the song or the part of the song that we're in. I'm just going to kind of take it from sort of the intro and we can apply that from there. So I'm just going to play the part and then we'll talk about counting it. Okay, so a couple things that make this potentially a little tricky to count are that, for one thing, you can hear it's got this almost kind of reggae style strum where most of the strums are on up strokes, and that just in and of itself can feel a little tricky and a little bit off because those are offbeat rhythms. So that's one thing to keep in mind that makes this a little difficult. The second thing is that, probably the most natural feeling time signature that we all kind of feel just really intuitively is 4/4 time, but I would probably count this song in 6/4 time. So, but let's even talk about what that means if you're maybe a little less familiar with reading time signatures or stuff that's on standard notation. So when you look at the time signature, there's a number on the top and a number on the bottom. The number on the top, if we're counting 6/4, means that there are 6 beats per measure. So it's telling you how many beats are going to be in the measure. The number on the bottom is telling you what kind of subdivision is going to get the beat. What I mean by that is, okay, we know we're counting 6 of something, but are we counting 6/8 notes, 6/16 notes, or quarter notes, or, that kind of thing. And if there's a 4 on the bottom, it means we're counting quarter notes. If there were an 8 on the bottom, we'd be counting eighth notes. You may come across something with a 16 on the bottom, but it seems to be really rare. I hardly ever see that. But that's what that would mean if there were a 16 on the bottom. Now, if we're counting 6/4, we're counting 6 quarter notes per measure. You could also count this as a measure of 4/4 and then a measure of 2/4, but I prefer just to keep it as one cohesive length that feels like a complete phrase. So that's just my preference with it. So the way that you would count this is that a lot of those up strums are going to be on the ands. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6. More up to tempo would be like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6. Even though that's really tedious, and you probably don't want to be counting like that when you're actually going to perform or anything, it is very handy to get a grasp of what's happening rhythmically, timing-wise. And so I hope that answered your question. Okay, next question is about You Enjoy Myself, and specifically the intro of the song. One question, does the very first arpeggio begin on a downbeat? I can't sort that part out because the first arpeggio is different than the rest of the intro. Okay, so if we look at the very beginning of the song, we can see that the time signature is 4/4. So again, the number on the top says we're counting 4 of something. The number on the bottom says we're counting quarter notes. So 4 quarter notes are going to be in each measure for the intro. It does change time signatures shortly after to 6/8. Okay, so the thing with this part is it is actually pretty tricky to count and play this at the same time, but I really encourage you to try this, and I'm going to hopefully guide you through it right now. For this intro, I would count this in 16th notes, counting in 4/4. Now, if that's unfamiliar to you, if you're maybe a little rusty with it, the way that I would count it would be 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Now here is how I would count this. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. Then it changes time signatures. Let me do that one more time, then we'll move on. So here we go. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. So I hope that helped. Okay, so one more timing question, and I saved this one to the end because it's probably the most difficult one. The question is regarding first tube. What's the timing of this riff? It seems completely different than the 4/4 of the drums and bass. It's truly bizarre. This is a really good lesson that we get from Trey on how you can take a pretty common time signature like 4/4 and switch around where you start something and really make it feel, quite offbeat, and it makes it really hard for the listener or somebody trying to play this to get their footing and get a grasp of where they are in time. Okay, so let's pull up the music for this and take a look. The first thing that we'll see here is we look at the first bit of music where the guitar comes in, because there's a bass intro that happens, is looking at the beat that we start on. Okay, so that's the first piece. Now, we're in 4/4 to start out here, but we don't start on the downbeat. We don't start on 1. We actually start on the and of 4. So the measure before you would start playing this part, you would say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's when you start. Okay, so I'm going to do that and play through this and count as we go. The way this works out is we're going to have 4 measures of 4/4 followed by 1 measure of 2/4, and then it kind of resets again. All right, so here we go. And I'm going to count in 16th notes as well for this one because it'll be necessary with all the dotted 8th notes that we're going to have and some 16th notes, and it just becomes necessary to count in smaller slices. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and. Actually, that should have been on the A string. That's kind of a tricky part to count and play, kind of like You Enjoy Myself, but I really would encourage you to try to tough through that. If you can pick up that skill of getting more comfortable counting and playing at the same time, it's a huge asset in your musicianship, and it will be really helpful for figuring out really tricky parts like this. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about modes for this last question, and this one's about stealing time from the faulty plan. What scale mode is used for the solo is the question here. So for this one, we're doing this kind of A minor pentatonic vibe for most of it, but if we're going to get really specific about what the mode is that we're playing, I would say that it's A Dorian, because a lot of times Trey will stay within the typical pentatonic pattern, but every once in a while he'll throw in this kind of special note, and oftentimes it's with a little bend. I think you'll hear what I'm talking about in a second. And that is what that Dorian flavor is. Now, if we look specifically at it, in this song we're doing this A Dorian kind of vibe, which means if we backtrack and say, okay, what key is A minor the second chord of? Then we would figure out, okay, if we go a whole step back, we're in the key of G. So this really opens up a lot of possibilities that we can play around with and mix and match between. On one hand, I would say most of it is just A minor pentatonic and really getting to know the 5 positions of that scale and getting to know it all over the place, figuring out how to slide back and forth between the positions. So I'm just going to point out a little exercise that I like to do to kind of highlight this, just to set the tone for it, and then talk about the mode part of it. And then lastly, the home key that it's in, the key of G. So here's a little exercise you can do if you want to get a little more proficient at moving around with your pentatonic. We'll do A minor pentatonic, which I think for a lot of guitar players is like a first pentatonic that we learn. So if we start here with the first position, we'll go like this. Now, once we get to there, what we're going to do is slide up a whole step to the next position. So I'm going to play that E string again. So I'm going to slide up a whole step, and I'm going to descend the second position of the pentatonic. And then I'm going to use that as a slide point to go up to the next position. Slide up to the next position and then descend. Slide up and hit the next one ascending. Then we can slide up and come all the way back down and end up kind of where we started, all the way back at the root, which is A. So right there, it's a pretty decent way to get used to moving around, ascending, descending, and so on. Okay, now, that's just the minor pentatonic, but as I said, it's more of a, it's not just that, but it's Dorian too. Now, if we're in the key of G, which we are for this example, A Dorian is basically, it's just an A minor scale with a major 6 is maybe how to think of that. Although I'm afraid that they may sound, more complicated than it really needs to be. That Dorian note in this scenario will be an F sharp. Okay, so let's just, instead of thinking of this whole other scale, if you just take the skeleton of that minor pentatonic that you're like 95% of the time probably going to be playing out of because it just sounds so good, maybe just try to sprinkle in an F sharp in each one of those positions. Okay, so for example, if we're in the first position, we can go like this. And then if I were to descend, it would be the same note coming back down. If you go to the next position up, and let's say you start with your middle finger on 8th fret, a low E, then you would have, there it is right there. Here it is again. And then you can descend. Now, I'm not going to go through all 5 positions. You can do that. You can look up the 5 positions or use the worksheet that I'm going to include for the exercise I just played where we slide up each time. And just challenge yourself to find an F sharp in each one of those positions and then try coming up with little, licks or little riffs, little things you can do that incorporate that note. So, for example, now instead of being able to do stuff like... when you're over here, like at the top of the first position, stuff like that. You can, maybe instead of playing the 8th fret on the B string, which is a G, maybe throw in that F sharp. So now you've got, And it's just a little more of that Dorian sound. A lot of times the bendy kind of thing that I was referencing earlier that Trey will do is he'll often bend from the Dorian note up. So it's a major 6 up to a flat 7. I like to bend up to the Dorian note. So have a little fun with that and just try to sprinkle that special note in addition to your pentatonic, which is just kind of like foolproof. It always sounds good. Now, another thing you can practice is keeping in mind the home key that you're in. If you are doing a Dorian, you're in the key of G. And so maybe practice playing some G major scale stuff over that too. Now, you have to tread carefully with this if you don't want to come across just sounding really scaly, like you're just playing a scale. There are times where a little scale run can be really cool. It's really just your preference. So at any rate, what I'm going to do here is just lay down like an A minor loop and then play a G major over it. And you'll kind of hear that it does have that Dorian sound. So that's kind of the vibe right there. This could also tie into an exercise like Trey's C to shining C exercise. Check out that video. And then what you could do is, instead of finding where C chords and C major scales are all over the neck, try to find where is a G major scale, where's a G chord all over the place, and then run that up and down the neck, and then try to apply that in a musical kind of way if you're vamping over stealing time from the faulty plan. So that'll kind of get that Dorian vibe. So I hope that I touched on all those questions and gave you a little insight into what you can do with them, how to count those couple tunes, what you can do with the mode here in the jam. And please leave any other questions you want to address specifically down below, and I'd love to keep doing this. I want to be as helpful as I can and answer specific questions, because I know sometimes you guys get these lessons and there still are questions because I don't explain a lot when I'm just playing through. So I look forward to more questions, and thanks so much for checking out the video. I'll see you next time.